Hello. Today I brought something very unusual to show you. I'll tell you what it is in a minute. Long, long ago, sailors used to go for weeks, months, sometimes even years on long journeys across the ocean. And they used to spend, some of them, their spare time making little model boats and putting them into bottles. Now my story is about another long voyage, the voyage that Mr. Noah made on board his Ark. And just for fun, I've made a little model toy Ark and put it in a bottle. Here it is, and if you look very carefully, you can see all the animals lined up along the deck. Now last week I told you about how all the people and the animals went on board 2 by 2 because of the great flood. And I also told you about how one little tiny animal, who shouldn't have been there at all, got on board as well. His name was Crockle, and he was a baby crocodile. And today I'm going to tell you about how Crockle saved the Ark, how he saved the great big elephants and the huge tall giraffes, the big fat hippos, the fierce other crocodiles. He even saved the lions, the king of the animals. Now, I've got Mr. Lion here. And Mrs. Lion, well, she's drawn here on the paper already. Shall we draw Mr. Lion as well? Here he goes. Mr. Lion has got a big, big, long mane. He's got a face, and 2 eyes, and a nose. And there is Mr. Lion. Now this story is called Crockle Saves the Ark. It was going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Mr. Noah had said so, and Mr. Noah knew. He had built a huge boat called the Ark, and put into it 2 of every kind of animal on earth, so that all would live through the great flood which was to come. Noah also brought his wife, Mrs. Noah, his 2 elder sons, Shem and Ham, and their wives, his youngest son, Japhet, and Japhet's friend, Janet, and their pet baby crocodile called Crockle. He shouldn't have been there at all, but Ham had left a bunghole open in the side of the Ark, just big enough for him to slip through. The day after the rain started to fall, gloomy Mr. and Mrs. Shem, and happy Mr. and Mrs. Ham, and Japhet and Janet, and Crockle, who was pretending not to be there, and all the animals settled down to wait for the Ark to float. High in his special observation cabin, Mr. Noah was busy with his maps and instruments. Being rather absent-minded, he had forgotten that the maps would be useless when the water covered all the land. At the other end of the room, sensible Mrs. Noah was watering the seedlings and herbs and the flowers and vegetables which she knew would come in useful when the great flood was over. "Time to take a peep outside," said Mr. Noah. "Yes, indeed," he added, opening the window. "The water's getting pretty deep." And looking down inside the Ark, he called, "Ahoy there below! Everything and everyone shipshape?" Japhet and Janet couldn't understand what he was talking about. None of the animals looked much like the shape of a ship, although Crockle did his very best to try. "Nay, children," said Ham, who happened to be passing, "that's not what shipshape means. It means safe and secure and waterproof, all set up for the voyage. Which reminds me, the Ark ought to be afloat by now. Let's go out on deck and have a look."
But when they got outside and looked, they had a shock. For although the water was rising fast, the Ark wasn't. Mr. Noah and the others joined them. "Now that is a very serious thing," said Mr. Noah. "I don't like the look of that at all." "I told you no good would come of it. We shall all be drowned. The animals are far too heavy," cried miserable Mrs. Shem. "Never fear," said Ham. "There must be some good reason why the Ark won't float." Just then everyone heard a loud splashing noise coming from inside the Ark. They ran in to look, and deep down in the bottom of the great hull they saw a strange sight. The hippos and the seals and the walruses and the sea lions and all the other water-loving animals and quite a few of the birds were having a swim. And the Ark was filling up with water. "There must be a leak," cried Ham. "How can we find it?" asked Japheth. "Let's send Crockle down to inspect," suggested Janet. "He's clever and he's good at swimming underwater." A moment later, Crockle dived into the water and disappeared. He was gone for some time. People were just starting to get worried when they heard Mrs. Ham shouting, "There he is! He's in the water outside the Ark." "How did he get out?" asked Japheth. "Same way as he got in, I expect," said Ham. "Through that bunghole near the keel. The water's coming in because the bungs come out." "And there it is," said Janet. "Fetch it, Crockle." And because Crockle was a clever young crocodile, he knew just what to do. He seized the bung in his teeth and dived down with it, found the hole, put the bung in place, hammered it back with his snout, and swam up to the surface again. Crockle was tired. He needed to be helped aboard the Ark again. "Well done," called Janet as they pulled him up. "We should all have been drowned without him," cried Japheth. "3 cheers for Crockle." And all the animals in the Ark joined in. They cheered and roared and barked and grunted and growled and howled and chirped. "Quiet now! Quiet, please!" cried Mr. Noah. "If we're going to get the Ark afloat, we must get rid of all the water inside." So then, although some of the animals were sorry to lose their swimming pool, everybody began to help. For the elephants with their trunks, it was easy. The giraffes used their long necks like cranes to lift up buckets full of water and to empty them over the side of the Ark. The rhinos and hippos worked a special seesaw pump which Ham had invented. And all the different kinds of monkey joined in and got in everybody's way. The cat family kept well out of the way because they all hated water. Last of all, the family put on their gumboots, made a chain and passed up bucket after bucket to Ham, who poured them over the side until every drop of water that had been inside was outside. And the Ark was afloat at last. Then everybody made a fuss of Crockle, because he had been so clever, and Shem even gave him half a ship's biscuit. Only Mr. Noah pretended not to see Crockle because he already had 2 perfectly good or perfectly bad crocodiles on board the Ark. That evening, everybody went out to see how the great flood was getting on. It was still raining hard. The land was quickly changing into sea. Only a few islands here and there were left. "And very soon there will be no land at all," said Mr. Noah. "I knew it," said gloomy Mrs. Shem. "We shall be adrift for ever and ever." But then Mrs. Ham brought out hot steaming cocoa, and everybody, Mrs. Shem included, began to feel much better. "I think it's going to be fun," said Janet. "I don't mind how long we stay on the Ark." "Hear, hear," said Japheth. "What about it, Crockle?" And Crockle gave a little grunt to show that he was happy too.
Well, that's the end of Crockle Saves the Ark. It's lucky he was there, isn't it? If he hadn't been, The Ark might never have floated and everybody would have been drowned. Next week, I shall be back again with another adventure of Crockle and Mr. Noah. Until then, goodbye.